Hello, everybody. Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is the Schaftlein Report, Monday's edition, reporting to you today from Louisville, Kentucky, which, by the way, was my hometown. Folks, a lot of stuff is going on in the country, and for those people who say that the media is trying to perpetrate a race war, boy, it's hard to argue with them. We've got a lot to cover with this, so let me go over the subjects for the day, and then we'll break it down for you. Maxine Waters, what a fool. This lady should be kicked out of Congress. And we're going to dive deep into that situation. The Chauvin trial, they made their closing arguments today. You got to step back and ask yourself, all the media is saying the country's on edge. People are calling out the National Guard. Cities are being fortified. For what? They're doing it in case Chauvin is found not guilty, so that people would be rioting in the streets. You know damn good and well that's what they are. I'm going to get into that one too, because that is asymptomatic of what's going on here in the United States relative to trials related to white cop killing black individual. We're going to get into all that. Vandals are vandalizing witnesses' houses. That's disgusting. And folks, liberals continue to bash the police despite all the crime that's been perpetrated and some of these mass shootings over the past few months. We'll get into that with you a little bit. The country is totally polarized along lines. 95% of Democrats approving of Biden, 88% of Republicans say no. We've got Elizabeth Warren pushing for student debt forgiveness, $50K, no legal right to do that. And why should your kids and people who didn't even go to school pay for a bunch of Democrat rich kids that did? Again, we'll break that down. We have an embarrassment at the United Nations representing the United States. Mike Pompeo called her out on it. We'll get into that. Arizona's going to audit their elections. Thank God. That was a close state. And then Rick Scott came out with some issues today that we're going to talk about related to the 2022 election. Folks, when you go down this, I'm telling you something, it'd be a shocker if Republicans don't take back the House and the Senate. And late breaking news out of New Mexico today, again, there's a state that abolished qualified immunity for police, and now we have a situation 20 officers resigned. So that's a lot on the plate, folks, but we're going to cover it all for you right now. So let's talk about Maxine Waters, Congresswoman from the Los Angeles area, Southern California. She is a disgusting human being. This woman should be drummed out of Congress. There shouldn't even be a debate about it. Heck, they tried to kick Marjorie Taylor Greene off committees just for saying stuff. Now, Maxine Waters is out there encouraging Black Lives Matter and these protesters who are out there night after night after night to stay on the streets, get more confrontational. I mean, they accused Trump of inciting the Capitol riot. Well, I'll be damned. I mean, if Maxine Waters isn't out there, she looks like something with a mask with a shield on, out there among the throngs of rioters. And let's not call them protesters. They're rioters is what they are. And, here she's encouraging this garbage. You had Congressman Lauren Bobert out of Colorado. She says that, Waters is inciting a riot. And I happen to agree with her. Other members of Congress have come forth. Maxine Waters should be drummed out of Congress. She should resign, or she should be impeached out of Congress, if they can impeach a congresswoman. Because for someone to take, even CNN folks made a comment about it saying she's literally throwing gasoline on the fire. So, I mean, call your Congress people. I would demand that she resign because she is a disgusting influence on American politics. And this woman sits as a chairman of a committee. She doesn't represent the people of Minnesota, has no good reason to be there other than to instigate trouble and egg on the mob. Folks, this is bad stuff. Along the lines, on the Chauvin trial, cities are on edge, okay? The city of Minneapolis is like a fort. I mean, it's been fortified. Washington, D.C. calling out the National Guard. 2 National Guard troops in the Minneapolis area were injured by a shooting yesterday. Folks, when you hear things like, okay, we're fortifying the cities. Police are canceling leave. Everybody's on guard. The clear implication of that is that if there's a verdict that goes against the common wisdom, and Derek Chauvin is not convicted or possibly convicted of a lesser charge, that cities are going to erupt. You're going to see the same garbage that you happened to see last summer happen again. And effectively, folks, and I'm going to say something pretty controversial here, it's going to be the effect of basically saying a certain segment of our population, whether it be liberals, whether it be people that hate cops, whether it be anarchists, you name it, cannot accept jury verdicts in the American system of justice. And folks, that's a problem because, if roles are reversed, okay, and that happens all the time. There's, a lot of times juries convict, but sometimes they don't convict. I mean, we have a system of justice, and basically what these cities, what these cities and some of these people are saying is that people cannot manage their emotions to accept a verdict. And we'll see if that's true, because supposedly the verdict's going to come this week. Pardon me. All right, next thing related to this. Boy, if I haven't seen a situation where the mob is trying to control the verdict, all you got to look is at this case. Vandals have targeted witnesses of the defense and put blood on their houses. They've identified where they live. And in one case, they put a pig's head on a pole with blood on the house. Folks, this is not the way this country's supposed to work. I can only blame it on the left wing, the Antifas, the BLMs, all these rioters. They're seeing a classic opportunity of a crisis, and they are taking advantage of it. Again, most Americans respect the justice system, but you've got that group of agitators, and they seem to prop up all over the country, that may or may not respect the jury's verdict. And again, folks, this is a problem because it tears away at the seams of the American justice system. And again, when you see it, these police chiefs aren't stupid. They know the people that live in their cities. And again, folks, make no mistake about this. Most of these cities that are preparing for, quote, the worst outcome in this case, which would mean an acquittal or guilty of a lesser charge, these are Democratic-run cities. Okay, so again, we have a situation here where you've got Democrats managing these cities. Police chiefs are doing the right thing in preparation for what, quote, might happen. And you basically have a breakdown of justice if that happens. So, again, we're not going to editorialize one way or other about the verdict, because that's up to the jury. But the reaction, and folks, like we told you last week on Schaftlein Report, when I hear liberal media folks talking about, well, it requires 12 to convict and only one not to, and we don't know how this is going to go, and it's almost like they're trying to prepare their viewers, which is the liberal left-wing mob, you can see that, for a possible outcome that is not expected. And folks, there's surprises in courtrooms all the time. You know it as well as I know it. And, again, for many of you, going back to the most famous case of all time, the Simpson case, there were a lot of people that didn't expect that to be an acquittal, but it was. So anyhow, you have a situation here where you really have a polarized environment right now. And you've got liberals attacking the police when the police are going out of their way to defend these cities. And look what you just had recently, where you had a situation on the East Coast where it looked like, I think in New York City, there was a guy with had a plan to go out in Times Square and just start shooting people up. The police thwarted that plan. And yet what happens after they thwart a plan like that? They're criticized by liberals. I mean, if that isn't just some of the most disgusting stuff you've ever seen, to see solid men and women in blue doing their jobs, thwarting attacks, tracking down criminals, solving cases of these people delivering on some of these mass shootings, and yet the media and the liberals criticize the police. I mean, folks, this is really a difficult situation. And I'm going to skip down a little bit, and I'm going to talk to you about this New Mexico situation that came up. Here again, the state of New Mexico abolished what's called qualified immunity. Now, I'm not going to give you the legal description from it, but basically, in layman's terms, that gives police officers, some protection because obviously they're carrying weapons and they're forced to use them. As a result of that issue, along with the politicizing all these cases, you've had 20 officers recently resign from the Albuquerque Police Department. Folks, when you lose 20 people from police department, that's a big deal. And some of them were on special cases. So again, folks, if the police are made to be the bad guys, which they're not, and the criminals, which are the bad guys, and the people pulling the trigger are deemed to be, not the perpetrator, and then all of a sudden, then you get, the liberal talking heads on the Sunday shows talking about gun control. Instead of, they're blaming the gun instead of blaming the actual shooter. Folks, I think it was on Meet the Press over the weekend. They talked about 185 mass shootings in this country this year so far. Well, you know who got the blame for it? The gun, not the shooter. And yet you have police forces all around the country responding and dealing with these situations. I would think every liberal in the country, every American should be thankful for that effort of our men in blue and not criticizing them. I mean, folks, this is the piece where the liberals, first they want to take away your guns, then they want to defund the police, and you get an absolute buffoon idiot like that Rashid Tlaib, who came out and basically said, we don't need any more cops, we don't need any more incarceration, no more jails. Even the left-wing Democrats shied away from that type of situation. I mean, what a nut job actually talking about something so stupid. I mean, you want a total societal breakdown, try going down the path that she suggested. But again, she's in that squad group, which are absolute numbskulls. I mean, idiots, wouldn't know anything about police work, and yet they're out there criticizing the police. Folks, this is pretty strong commentary, but that's the way it is. And I know a lot of you in our audience feel the same way. You're sick and damn tired of hearing these liberals, these whiny-eyed, smart-ass snots criticizing our police force, and then basically the cops go out, they do their job, and they do it well, 99% plus of the time. So if we're going to be tested, folks, in this country over the next few days, assuming the Chauvin trial goes, we have a verdict in it. And just remember one thing, folks, the police, they're on the side of the American people. Let's not forget that. Despite this criticism, despite some issues that come up periodically, overwhelmingly, the American people support their police. Now, again, the country is polarized, not just over this, but over Biden's job itself. This is it's no surprise to me. But when I saw the polling figure over the weekend, 95% of Democrats approve of the job Biden's doing. That's actually a little higher than Republicans approved of Trump. And yet 88% of Republicans think Biden is not doing a good job. And Biden's overall approval rating, depending upon what poll you're looking at, is pretty good right now. He's in the low 50s, and that's a figure that Trump would like. But think about this too, folks. During this first 3 months of Biden's presidency, again, I saw this poll over the weekend too. Roughly 59-60% of the press coverage of President Biden has been positive, versus Donald Trump at the same time in his presidency, 85% of the coverage was negative. Well, considering how the media influences a lot of Americans, look, these numbers aren't that surprising. I'm a little surprised that many Democrats approve of Biden, because a lot of people do not approve of what he's doing at the border. They are not happy with that at all. But his strong suit is his response and the administration's response for coronavirus vaccine distribution. That's a big deal. Okay, that's the hot topic issue. So if the public perceives that the Biden administration is doing well, then they're going to get high remarks, as they should. But overall, boy, that really, folks, that just codifies the divide in this country between Republicans and Democrats. So, helpful hints for you there. And speaking of the border crisis, again, 28 days now, and Vice President Harris, who was appointed to fix this problem, not a press conference. She's not seen at the border. Folks, if I didn't know any better, I'd say she's in the witness protection program. Just kidding. But reality is, maybe there's some infighting going on in the Biden administration. Maybe she really doesn't want to be seen down there at the border for political reasons. I mean, everybody knows it's a hot mess down there. Everybody knows there's migrant children. Everybody knows the facilities are being expanded. And over the weekend, Joe Biden admitted it was a border crisis. Well, the rest of America already knew that. So now it's good that the president's finally catching up to that. And then what did the White House do? Well, they tried to back it up a little bit and say, nah, he didn't really mean it's a crisis. You know damn good and well, folks, it is a crisis down there. It's ridiculous what's going on. It was encouraged by President Biden. And now we're having all these issues down at the border. And people that live at the border are none too happy about it. And Americans in general, they want to see a secure border. They do not want to see open borders. They do not want to see all these children coming into the country unaccompanied, that we have to take care of them. And they don't like the fact that these smugglers are getting rich doing it. The cartels are making money on it. And who ends up being victimized? The American people. Because we got to pay for this stuff. And we got to treat these people. Joe Biden and the Biden administration are firmly to blame for this crisis at the border. And again, where is Vice President Harris? She haven't had a news conference. Folks, this is polling. This shows to be the biggest issue of Americans' concern. Not Republicans, Democrats, Americans. She gets appointed to lead the effort, and she's in the witness protection program. So you go figure. My only thought would be, I think she knows it's an embarrassment. I think she knows it's a problem, and she didn't want to set anywhere near that southern border. So we'll keep an eye on it for you and see how that plays itself out. And for those of you who paid your student debt, for those of us who borrowed money when we went to school, we paid it back. And for those current borrowers who are paying back their student loans, and for those borrowers that citizens that never went to college, that are working somewhere else, why should people that did not go to college, chose not to borrow money, why should they be responsible for someone who decided to borrow money to go to college? Elizabeth Warren is putting pressure on Joe Biden, and supposedly he's looking at options to forgive up to $50,000 of student debt. Folks, that's a big violation of the promise he made. During the campaign and as president, Joe Biden has said he would consider and look into canceling student debt up to $50,000. Okay, up to $10,000. But Schumer and Elizabeth Warren were pushing for 50. Now you might ask yourself a question. Okay, first of all, where does it give Biden the authority to do this? It's questionable whether he has the authority to do it at all. My belief is if he knew he had the authority to do it, he probably already would have written off $10,000. But it's unclear whether he does. And if he issues some type of an executive order related to financial affairs, which are generally under the purview of Congress, I think that's going to be challenged and it may not stand up in court. But you have to ask yourself the question, why is Warren and Schumer and all these Democrats pushing for student loan forgiveness? Well, I'll tell you why. Because a lot of their rich liberal donor friends in high tax states and some in non-high tax states, their kids went to all these private schools, in some cases to state colleges. They borrowed a lot of money. Some of them came out with worthless degrees that they can't get a job with. And others came out with degrees, and we hit all of a sudden with coronavirus. People weren't hiring. Now they're coming back, of course. But a lot of people took on debt and ended up in careers where they frankly couldn't pay back the debt. Okay, that's not your fault, my fault. It's not the fault that people didn't go to school. And the idea, it just really, it just goes fundamentally against what America's all about, is why should people that did not go to school and those people who paid back their student debt bail out a bunch of Democrats who took the money on their own free will, borrowed it, and now they're trying to get Democratic legislatures to forgive that debt. Folks, you know, if you're going to forgive student debt, like Senator John Kennedy said, why not forgive everything? You know, forgive mortgage, credit cards, you name it. Where does it end? Folks, that's bad policy. You know it. I know it. And even the people that borrowed the money. Now, you know what kind of comment you get from some of these liberal Democrats? Well, this is part of racial equity. What the hell is racial equity? I'll tell you what it is. It's a code word for, effectively, if you don't have distribution of capital to minorities, they're trying to backdoor it. And basically, they're making the argument, well, a bunch of rich liberals that went to private schools and a bunch of people who were disadvantaged, who couldn't qualify, borrowed money, and now to help create a more equitable situation, you know, we want to sort of level the playing field, and we want that student debt forgiven. Now, they're not going to say it like this, folks, okay? What they will tell you is, oh, our students are burdened. Look, folks, think about it. Younger people voted for Democrats by a 2-to-1 margin, okay? So it's basically pale. They're trying to pay back people that voted for them. But what the Democrats will claim is, oh, so many people we're in this coronavirus, they're burdened by debt, you know, we're just coming out of it, jobs are being created. We need to help the economy by forgiving these debts. Baloney. All this is a payoff to their voters. And again, Biden promised when he was campaigning, he said, I'm not for that type of student loan forgiveness. He did say he would consider 10 grand. So what do the Democrats always do? They push, max it to the limit. And who does it hurt, folks? It's not hurting these college kids that borrowed the money. Maybe their family's rich, maybe their family's not. But it hurts the American taxpayer because, folks, private banks, they don't have any of these loans on their books. It's mainly the federal government. So if Joe Biden goes out there and with the stroke of a pen abolishes, say, 10 to 50K, of course it's going to be challenged. But at the end of the day, the taxpayers put the bill for this. Since when are taxpayers supposed to be footing the bill for deadbeat college kids that went in, borrowed the money on their own free will, and now Democratic legislatures in Congress, the United States Congress, particularly the Senate, are trying to push to have that debt forgiven? Folks, again, it's the world upside down thing. What used to be, you know, you go to school, you borrow money, you pay it back. Now you don't. I mean, President Trump set aside to help during the virus. He suspended interest payments on that debt. I mean, which I thought was fair and reasonable. But now the idea of forgiving debt to people that borrowed it, I mean, it smacks a lot of people the wrong way. And it's not a policy supported by a majority of the American public. But it is a favorite policy of the left wing of the Democratic Party, which, oh, by the way, if you notice, folks, we're seeing a lot of that. I mean, Biden clearly is getting pulled to the left. So I don't know. I think it's not good, but we'll see where it goes. But that is out percolating right now, folks. And shifting gears here for a minute, in the absolute embarrassing, most stupid comment I heard over the weekend came from our ambassador, Mrs. Thomas Greenfield, at the United Nations. She's the UN ambassador to the UN. And basically, she made a comment about the stain of slavery on the United States, basically blaming the United States for sins of the past. Mike Pompeo, who, in my view, is one of the top presidential candidates, leading among some people, assuming President Trump doesn't run. Mike Pompeo, who was a congressman, CIA director, Secretary of State, he came out and said she should resign. I mean, think about it, folks. The person who represents the United States at the UN blasting the United States. I mean, I agree with Pompeo 100%. This woman should resign. If she doesn't believe in this country, she's got no business being there. And this country would be better off represented by someone. Truly to God, the Biden administration can find someone who believes in America and will represent America and not blame America. Pompeo is spot on this one, folks. So keep that in mind. Again, you're talking about what's up is down and what down is up. Here's another classic example. And we're going to summarize some of this stuff at the end. Now, 2020 election. A lot of people are still just raw over what happened there. The state of Arizona, which is one of the tightly contested states. I mean, Biden beat Trump there. I think it was 11, 12,000 votes, something like that. The state of Arizona, the Senate has passed a motion. They are going to audit the 2020 election, which I think is a good thing. Again, the more credibility an audit brings to the results, the more confidence people will have in their democracy. I know there's a lot of debate going on in various states about voting rights laws. And I know a lot of these corporations, these woke corporations, are getting involved. The American public, by about a 60-40 margin, believe companies should stay out of that political environment. But at least from an audit point of view, the state of Arizona is moving forward. Now, it may be too little too late, but at least, look, one thing an audit will do, it will confirm if the balloting was correct. You hope it is. You hope that they validate that the election results were correct. But we'll see. And I think that's a good thing coming up. Now, again, Biden, okay, here's another thing that came out this afternoon. And this is, folks, this is just like the border situation, the wokeness, the political correctness. I got to tell you, this administration, at times, they just are not representing the vast majority of the American people. They are playing to the far left. Perfect example, they came out today and said, we will no longer, at our Customs and Immigration departments, use the term illegal alien. Well, what the hell are they? They're illegal aliens. And yet the Biden administration is now saying, no, we're not going to use that term anymore. It's a cruel term to use. Cruel, my ass. It is what it is. I mean, if someone is here in this country illegal, they are an illegal alien. Now, they're probably going to soften it down, use words like undocumented this or that. Who knows what they're going to call it? But clearly, the Biden administration is for open borders, and they're not on this, they're not on the side of the American people on this. Most Americans, the overwhelming majority, want secure borders. So, folks, we a lot of tough issues today to talk about, but I want to sum up this. Okay, and Rick Scott, he is chairman for the Republican senatorial campaign, and Rick Scott was interviewed over the weekend and was asked about the 2022 election. And folks, if you just think about this a minute, a lot of people are saying these Democrats are going so far left, which they are, and you just go through a list of issues and you say, okay, are the American people for open borders? No, they're not. That's why the American people do not approve of the job Joe Biden is doing at the border. Second, do most Americans want their kids in school? The answer is yes. People are getting vaccinated. People are in school in a lot of states. Some states are not. Parents want their kids in school. They don't want these liberal Democrats and these teachers union not allowing kids to go to school. So there's two issues that are in Republicans' favor. Issue number 3, men playing women's sports. Okay, all these soccer moms out there, those of you that voted for Joe Biden, are you happy about the fact that your daughters who are playing soccer are competing against men? I wouldn't think so. And it goes in from women's wrestling, women's, you name it, any women's sport. A lot of states are taking it upon themselves to ban this transgenderism stuff that is just representing a tiny, tiny fraction of the American public. And yet, the woke left and the far left-wing radical kooks, they want you to believe this is mainstream. It's not, folks. So all you soccer moms out there, those of you that voted for Joe Biden, think about that next time your daughter comes home and she says, Mom, some guy beat me out on the girls' soccer team. Oh, American public is not going to keep tolerating this stuff. Voter ID. Okay, you got to have an ID to go everywhere. You know it, and I know it. And guess what, folks? 78 to 80% of Americans, and that includes Republicans, Democrats, Independents, support strengthening our voter ID laws. You know who doesn't support it? The left-wing Democrats who try to win elections by cheating with people that don't have voter ID. You know it, and I know it. So voter ID is a fourth issue that the Democrats are on the wrong side of the issue. Fifth, expanding and packing the court. Well, Nancy Pelosi even said she's not putting that one on the agenda, and for good reason. I'm not sure the number, 65, 70, 75% of Americans, they do not want to change the number of justices on the Supreme Court. But here again, these far left-wing radical kooks came out, Markey from Wisconsin, from Massachusetts, and then some liberals in the House coming out. Oh, yeah, we need to expand it by 4 more. Why do you think they want to expand it by 4? Because that would give Democrats control of the Supreme Court. And again, the American public don't want this, and Pelosi's even smart enough to recognize this is a dumb idea at this time. We don't want to go there. 5. Issue number 6, Keystone Pipeline. We lost like 12,000 jobs because of the Keystone Pipeline, and Joe Biden basically anything with the environmental wackos and all these climate people, when in fact 12,000 Americans lost their jobs. The Keystone Pipeline isn't going to have 1 iota effect on climate change. You know, and I know it, but the Democrats like to say that. So there's another issue in favor of the Republicans. Here's another one for you. How many people in the country you think are for D.C. statehood? I can tell you, not many, because D.C. was basically carved out of Maryland. If they want their own statehood, let's give it back to the state of Maryland. Okay? People are not in favor of D.C. statehood. Then you know what you'd have? Every time Congress shifts, you get Democrats in control right now, and the reason they want D.C. statehood is because 2 more liberal Democratic senators. Well, guess what? Next time there's a Republican Congress, what are we going to do? Maybe cut Wyoming in half and say East Wyoming, West Wyoming. Well, they'll say, well, Mark, there's not many people live there. So what? That's the point. You know, the country, we have 50 states in this country, and we don't need to be adding one just because Democrats are lustful for power in their far left-wing base. You know, so there's another one there. And then, again, you have a situation where you've got filibuster issues. Thank God some people are standing on principle and they're not going there. But when you add it all together, the items I just talked about, everything from open borders, schools, men trying to be women, voter ID, Keystone Pipeline, immigration, DC state, and then the McGill, the big one of all of them, raising taxes. Okay, again, I don't know if even Democrats are going to support that for Biden's infrastructure plan, but we'll see, folks. So I think the Republicans are on the right side of a lot of these issues. The American people seem to be on the right side of these issues. And folks, it's sort of a mystery. Why is Biden governing to the far left? Again, they always overstep their bounds, and that's what's happening right now. So keep an eye on it, folks. We're going to tell you the real story, but always remember now, 2022, the campaigning for that is going to start in about the next 4, 5, 6 months. So I think the Republicans, based upon these Democratic left-leaning policies, stand a very, very good chance of taking back the House and the Senate. And that's just off the policies. That doesn't even take into account the redistricting that we're going to see. So a lot on the plate today, a lot to digest. We're going to keep on top of all these issues. And as news breaks, we'll bring it to you, of course. Now, tomorrow I'm going to be traveling, so we will be having a special guest host tomorrow, Matt Stout, who's been on the program many times. Matt is a political operative in the state of Georgia. You've seen him on our show 7, 8 times. Great guy. And then I'll be back on Wednesday with a very special guest, Dr. Stephen Hotze, who lives just outside of Houston. Steve is involved in a lot of the Texas voter ID laws and voter security, and he's a great guy. I'm looking forward to having Steve on the show on Wednesday. So stay safe. Thank you for watching today, and I will see you on Wednesday. Have a nice evening.